She had no idea that the animal staring at her had already sent one groom to the surgeon and bitten through a hunting glove as though it were paper. She took one more step. The Duke raised the pistol. "Miss, stop." She did. The hound did not. His head lowered. His shoulders tightened. A growl rolled through the yard so deep that the stable windows seemed to vibrate with it. The young woman looked at him, not at the pistol, not at the Duke, at the dog. Then she slowly placed her basket on the ground, and she did something that no one watching would ever forget. She held out her hand. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ferocious animal walked toward her. One step, then another. The Duke's finger tightened around the pistol. The hound stopped directly in front of the woman. He lowered his enormous head and bowed. If you enjoy stories where a woman's quiet strength changes the fate of a powerful man, stay with me, because what happened in that stable yard was only the beginning. In the spring of 1821, Ashbourne Hall had become a place people approached carefully. The estate itself was beautiful. That was never in question. The house stood on a rise above 300 acres of pasture and woodland, its pale stone walls catching the morning light, and its long windows overlooking a lake, where swans moved across the water like small white boats. But beauty did not make a place welcoming, and Ashbourne Hall had not been welcoming for nearly 2 years. The reason had 4 legs. His name was Nero. He had belonged to the Duke's younger brother, Lord Julian Ashbourne, who had died in a riding accident 18 months earlier. Julian had been 26. He had been reckless, charming, and very fond of animals. Nero had been his constant companion. After Julian's death, the dog had changed. At first, the household believed it was grief. Nero stopped eating. He refused to leave the kennels. He slept beside the door of the room Julian had occupied. Then, one morning, a groom tried to move him. Nero attacked. After that, another groom. Then, a kennel master. Then, a visiting huntsman who had made the mistake of laughing when the dog growled. By the end of the first year, Nero was kept behind 2 iron gates, with a chain thick enough to restrain a carriage horse. The Duke had ordered everyone to leave him alone. It was the only humane decision he believed remained. The Duke of Ashbourne was not a man known for sentiment. His name was Adrian Vale. He was 32 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, and possessed of the kind of quiet authority that made servants straighten their backs before he had spoken a word. He had served in the army. He had seen men die. He had inherited the dukedom after his father died, and his elder brother followed 2 years later. By 32, Adrian had learned that most problems yielded to discipline. Nero did not. And that morning, when the chain broke, Adrian had already made his decision. The dog would be put down. He hated himself for it. But he would do it. Then a flower seller walked into his yard. Her name was Clara Bell. She was 24 years old. She rented 2 rooms above a baker's shop in the village of Ashcombe, and earned her living selling herbs, flowers, and small bundles of medicinal plants at the weekly market. She had no title, no fortune, no fashionable connections. She owned 3 dresses suitable for public appearance, and 1 pair of boots that had been repaired so many times the original leather could barely be seen. But Clara knew plants. Her mother had taught her. Her grandmother had taught her mother. And there were things Clara understood about living creatures that no school could have given her. She knew when a horse was frightened before it reared. She knew when a dog was angry and when it was merely afraid. She knew the difference between pain and aggression. And when she looked into Nero's eyes that morning, she saw something the Duke had missed. The animal was not preparing to attack. He was waiting. Miss Bell. She glanced over her shoulder. The Duke had lowered the pistol slightly. She knew him, of course. Everyone in Ashcombe knew the Duke. But knowing a man existed and standing 10 feet from his pistol were two very different experiences. Your Grace, come away from the animal. Clara looked back at Nero. His head was still lowered. He's frightened. The Duke's expression hardened. He has bitten 3 men. Because they frightened him. A murmur went through the stable yard. Nobody spoke to Adrian Vale like that. Certainly not a flower seller. The Duke took 1 step forward. Miss Bell, you have no idea what you're dealing with. Perhaps. She looked at Nero again. But I know what he isn't. And what is that? Mad. Something changed in the Duke's expression. Not much, only enough for Clara to notice. He lowered the pistol completely. How do you know? She looked at the dog's ears. Because he keeps looking at the gate. The Duke glanced toward it. What does that mean? He wants to leave. Nero has been given the entire east paddock. He doesn't want the paddock. Clara hesitated. Then she looked toward the house. He wants wherever Lord Julian used to take him. Silence. The Duke's face changed. For the first time that morning, Clara saw something behind the authority. Pain. It disappeared quickly, but she had seen it. You knew my brother? No, Your Grace. Then how could you know that? Because the dog keeps looking toward the old carriage road. Adrian followed her gaze. The old carriage road ran along the northern boundary of the estate. It had not been used since Julian's death. Clara slowly moved closer to Nero. The dog did not growl. She stopped. Then she held out her hand. Easy. Nero sniffed. His nose touched her palm. The stable boy on the wall made a frightened sound. The Duke did not move. Neither did Clara. The dog closed his eyes. Then, slowly, almost carefully, Nero lowered himself onto his front legs. His head touched the ground. He bowed. No one spoke. Clara ran her fingers once over the scar beside his eye. The enormous hound sighed, not a growl, not a warning, a sigh. Then he laid his head against her skirt. The Duke stared. He had watched men try to control Nero. He had watched trained handlers fail. He had watched the dog turn on anyone who approached him with authority. But the flower seller had walked into his yard and touched the animal, as though they had known one another for years. How did you do that? Adrian asked. Clara looked up. I didn't. What do you mean? He did. And that was the first thing about Clara Bell that Adrian Vale did not understand. It would not be the last. By that evening, the entire village knew. The Duke's savage hound had bowed to a flower seller. By the next morning, the story had grown. Some said Clara had witchcraft. Others said she had whispered to the dog. One woman at the bakery insisted she had seen the animal kneel. A man at the blacksmith claimed the Duke had been so astonished he nearly dropped his pistol. Clara ignored all of it. She had flowers to sell. But just before noon, a carriage bearing the Ashbourne crest stopped beside her stall. The Duke stepped out. He looked at the baskets of lavender and rosemary, then at Clara. I need you to come to the hall. She stared at him. Why? Nero has refused food. Clara frowned. Since when? Since you left. That answer troubled her. She wiped her hands on her apron. I'll come. The Duke held out his hand to help her into the carriage. She ignored it and climbed in herself. Something very close to amusement passed across his face. It was gone before she could be certain. At Ashbourne Hall, Clara was taken directly to the kennels. Nero rose when she entered. His tail moved once. The Duke watched from the doorway. Clara knelt beside the animal. What happened? He wouldn't eat. She examined the bowl. The meat had been untouched. She smelled it. Then her expression changed. Who prepared this? The kitchen staff. Who? Mrs. Finch. Bring her here. The Duke raised an eyebrow. You think she poisoned him? No. Clara lifted a small piece of meat. I think someone changed what he's used to. Adrian stared at her. He ate from the same kitchen for a year. Not this, she pointed to the bowl. There are cloves. So? Nero hates cloves. The Duke frowned. How would you know? Clara glanced at him. He told me. For the first time, the Duke smiled. It was brief, almost unwilling. But Clara saw it, and something inside her shifted. She had heard people describe Adrian Vale as cold. She had believed them. She had not expected his smile to make him look younger. She looked away first. The next week changed everything. Clara began visiting the kennels each morning. Nero allowed her to brush him. Then he allowed the Duke to stand beside her. Then, after several days, he allowed Adrian to touch his collar. It was a small victory, but Adrian treated it as though it mattered, and perhaps it did, because Nero was the last living thing that had belonged to Julian. Every time Adrian looked at the dog, he saw his brother. Every time Nero refused him, he was reminded that grief could outlast anger, duty, and even love. Clara understood that without being told. She also understood something else. The Duke was lonely, not because he lacked people. Ashbourne Hall had dozens of servants. There were neighbors, tenants, correspondents, visitors, but none of them knew how to speak to him without speaking to the Duke first. Clara did. She spoke to Adrian Vale. Not his title, not his fortune, not his reputation, and Adrian began finding reasons to visit the kennels when she was there. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they did not. One evening, rain began falling just before sunset. Clara was preparing to leave when Adrian stopped her beneath the stone archway. You should wait. I've walked home in worse. You'll catch cold. I sell herbs for a living, Your Grace. I know what to do about a cold. He looked at her. Do you always argue? Only when I'm right. He almost smiled again. Then Nero growled. Both of them turned. The dog was staring toward the far end of the yard. Someone was there. A shadow moved behind the stable. Adrian's expression hardened. Stay here. He walked toward the darkness. Clara followed. I said stay, and I heard you. He stopped. She stopped too. The Duke looked at her. Then he laughed quietly. You are remarkably difficult. I've been told. They reached the stable door. Nothing. Only rain. Only the horses shifting in their stalls. Then Clara noticed something on the ground. A strip of blue ribbon. She picked it up. Adrian went still. That belonged to Julian. Are you certain? I tied it around Nero's collar the week before my brother died. Clara looked toward the darkness beyond the stable. Then someone has been here. The Duke took the ribbon from her. His face had become unreadable. Go back to the house. This time Clara obeyed. But she did not sleep that night. Neither did Adrian. The following morning, a letter arrived. It was addressed to the Duke. There was no signature, only 6 words. Your brother did not die by accident. Adrian read it twice. Then a third time. His hand tightened around the paper. Clara found him an hour later in the library. He had not sent for her. She almost turned away. Then she saw his face. What happened? He handed her the letter. She read it. Who sent this? I don't know. Do you believe it? He looked toward the window. I've spent 18 months telling myself I don't. Clara folded the letter. That isn't what I asked. He turned. No. She waited. I don't know what I believe. That was the first time Clara saw the man beneath the Duke, not the controlled nobleman, not the soldier, a brother who had spent a year and a half trying not to wonder whether he had failed the person he loved most. "Then find out," she said. He stared at her. "How?" "Start with Nero." Adrian frowned. "The dog?" Julian trusted him. She placed the blue ribbon on the desk. "Animals remember things people forget." The Duke looked down at it, and that was when the mystery became something more than a letter. It became a promise. They began searching. They discovered that Julian had visited the northern woods the day before his death. They discovered that his horse had been changed without his knowledge. They discovered that one of the stable hands had left Ashbourne Hall 3 days afterward. And they discovered that someone had paid that man enough money to disappear. But they found no proof. Then the trouble began. Someone poisoned Nero. Not enough to kill him. Enough to make him weak. Clara found him before breakfast. The dog was lying beside the kennel door, unable to stand. She screamed for help. Adrian came running. He dropped to his knees beside Nero. For the first time since Clara had known him, she saw panic in his face. "Get the surgeon. He's not a surgeon's case," Clara said. "What?" "Get hot water, charcoal, and the blue bottle in my basket." Adrian stared at her. "Now." He obeyed. For 3 hours they worked. Clara stayed beside Nero. Adrian never left. When the dog finally lifted his head, the Duke closed his eyes. His hand rested on Nero's neck. The animal breathed against his wrist. Clara watched them. She realized then that she had stopped thinking about Adrian as a duke. That was dangerous, because he was beginning to look at her as though she were something other than a flower seller. And neither of them had said a word about it. That afternoon, Adrian found Clara in the garden. "You saved him. He saved himself. He wouldn't have survived without you." She shrugged. "You stayed. I wasn't leaving." Their eyes met. The garden suddenly seemed very quiet. "You should," Clara said softly. "Why?" "Because people are talking. I've never cared much for people talking. You will when they talk about me." His jaw tightened. "They already do. Then perhaps you should stop giving them reasons." He stepped closer. "What reason have I given them?" Clara looked away. "This." He understood. And for several seconds neither spoke. Then he said, very quietly, "I don't want to stop." Clara looked at him. Neither of them moved. Then a stable boy came running across the lawn. "Your Grace," the moment broke. "The old carriage house is on fire." They ran. Smoke was already pouring from the windows. Adrian shouted for water. Men rushed from the stable. Clara saw Nero standing beside the kennels, barking toward the burning building. Then she saw something, a figure running behind the carriage house. She grabbed Adrian's arm. There, he turned. The man disappeared into the trees. Adrian ran after him. Clara followed. Branches struck her face. Mud covered her boots. The figure reached the old carriage road. Then Nero appeared. The great hound had broken his chain again. He ran past Clara like a black shadow. The stranger turned. Too late. Nero struck him from behind. The man fell. Adrian reached them moments later. The stranger struggled. Nero growled inches from his throat. "Call him off," Adrian ordered. Clara stepped forward. "Nero." The dog looked at her, then moved away. The man was dragged to his feet. Adrian searched him. Inside his coat was a small metal box. Clara recognized it. "What's that?" Adrian opened it. Inside was Julian's signet ring, the one believed to have been lost the night he died. Adrian stared at it. Then the prisoner laughed. You should have left the past buried. The Duke's face became cold. Who sent you? The man said nothing. Adrian looked at Clara. She saw the answer before he spoke. They had found the man who had helped destroy Julian's life. But he wasn't the mastermind. There was someone else, someone close, someone who had known the Duke's household well enough to poison Nero, enter the carriage house, and manipulate the stable records. They searched the estate again. This time they found the missing ledger. It was hidden beneath a loose stone in the old stable wall. Clara opened it. Payments, dates, names. One name appeared again and again. Lord Henry Ashbourne, Julian's cousin, Adrian's closest surviving male relative, the man who had stood beside Adrian at the funeral, the man who had comforted him, the man who had told him for 18 months that Julian's death had been an accident. Adrian read the ledger. He said nothing. Clara watched his face. Your Grace. He folded the pages. Don't call me that. She hesitated. Adrian. He looked at her. I need you to leave the estate tonight. No, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. He will come after you. He already has. Silence. Adrian stepped toward her. You could die. So could you. I am accustomed to danger. And I am accustomed to being told what I cannot do. His expression softened. You are impossible. So you've said. He reached for her hand. This time she did not pull away. His fingers closed around hers. Clara. Yes? If I had met you before all this. He stopped. She waited. What? He looked at her. I would have wanted you anyway. Her breath caught. Then Nero barked from outside. The sound made them both laugh. It was almost absurd. After all the danger, all the grief, all the secrets, the hound had interrupted the most important moment of the Duke's life. Clara smiled. Perhaps he has better judgment than you. I doubt that. Then why did he bow to me? Adrian looked toward the window. I think he knew. Knew what? He looked back at her. That you were the first person who wasn't afraid of what was broken. She could not answer. The next morning, Lord Henry was confronted. He denied everything, until Adrian placed the ledger on the table. Then the denial became anger. Then anger became confession. Henry had wanted the Ashbourne inheritance. Julian's death had been arranged. Adrian was supposed to be next. Nero had become a problem because the dog had witnessed too much. He had been near Julian that final evening. He had seen the man who had tampered with the horse. And when Henry realized the animal still reacted violently to anyone wearing the same scent and leather used that night, he had decided Nero must die. But he had underestimated Clara. He had underestimated Adrian. And most of all, he had underestimated a grieving hound that remembered. The truth destroyed Henry's claim. It also restored Julian's name. Months later, the old northern road was reopened. Adrian rode there with Clara. Nero ran ahead. The fields were green. The sky was clear. And for the first time, the road carried no memory of death. Clara stopped beneath an oak tree. Adrian dismounted. You've been quiet. I was thinking. That can be dangerous. She smiled. You'll have to get used to it. He took her hand. I think I've already become rather fond of dangerous things. She looked at him. Is that a proposal? No. She raised an eyebrow. Good. He smiled. It is a promise. A promise of what? That I will spend the rest of my life giving you reasons to stay. Clara looked toward Nero. The hound had stopped several yards away. He turned, looked back at them, then lowered his great head and bowed. Clara laughed. Adrian shook his head. He's showing off, perhaps. She slipped her hand into the Duke's, and together they walked toward him. The story of the savage hound remained in Ashcombe for years. People told it differently. Some said the Duke had nearly shot the animal. Some said the flower seller possessed a mysterious gift. Some insisted Nero had recognized Clara's goodness the moment he saw her. But Clara knew the truth. There had been no magic in that stable yard, only a frightened animal, a grieving woman, and a man who had forgotten that gentleness could be stronger than force. Nero had not bowed because Clara commanded him. He had bowed because, for the first time since losing the man he loved, he had found someone who understood that fear could look like anger, grief could look like violence, and trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned. And perhaps that was why the Duke of Ashbourne loved her, not because she had tamed the beast, but because she had never tried to. She had simply reached out her hand and waited. And sometimes, when the right person comes along, that is all it takes to make even the fiercest heart lower its head.